And the Underdog Leadership Podcast Holiday Edition season is all about how to identify the markers of burnout. And trust me, the irony is not lost, dear listener, on the fact that I bring you burnout for the Christmas holidays and for our holidays, for all of the folks that celebrate other holidays other than the Christian ones. So why? Why am I bringing you this? First of all, to acknowledge that this time of year has this wonderful sort of mixture, perfect storm of work year end, family requirements and expectations, and then all of those societal things that are also forced upon us for what we're supposed to look like, feel like, do like, accomplish, and all those good things. But I do want to get serious for a second about the word burnout. It is now being bandied around kind of as a standard thing, this expectation that we're all going to go through it. I'm not so sure about that. I'll tell you my own personal experience about burnout. It's a lot like being pregnant. It took you 9 months to birth the baby, and it's going to take you 9 months to get back out to where you were before. And there's this myth out there that we have burnout, we take a weekend off or 2 weeks off and we snap our fingers and suddenly we're back to the same person we were before. Based on my experiences, that's actually not what happens. And I really want to normalize that on this call. But if you're listening to this episode, you've asked yourself the question, am I in burnout? How do I know I'm in burnout? A couple thoughts for you. People that are in burnout have lost the simple joys of the day-to-day. Suddenly, everything seems hard. Just getting out of bed seems hard. Figuring out what to eat for lunch seems hard. And there's no joy in those tasks that we used to enjoy at work. Similarly, nothing seems to make sense or have a purpose anymore. So this sense of why bother? Nothing's going to change starts to permeate our thoughts. And for those of you that are relatively eternal optimists like myself or are harbingers of opportunity, this can feel really strange and really odd. Third of all, which is something that I've definitely felt, is this sort of general fog at a brain level. You find yourself being ineffective. You find yourself really struggling to not just stay on task, but figure out what the heck the next task is. And because of it, you're terribly inefficient and everything seems like quicksand. Like it almost seems like proof positive that everything you touch is a bit of a massive boulder and it doesn't seem to have an end to it. That's what I really want to highlight. There is a lot of mental lifting that you're doing that seems like extra work all of a sudden. Another really simple way to say it is you look at the world through sepia or black and white when the world used to be technicolor. So why is this happening? There's a couple of reasons, and we know there's some research about this. One thing is that when we are in stress mode, when we are in activity mode, we actually don't have a lot of time to process emotions. So there's a wonderful book called Burnout, and that I pulled one piece from that I thought was very powerful. It's the idea that emotions actually have a tunnel through them. You go through a tunnel. You have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And many people abort the experience of emotions halfway through. So they get halfway through the tunnel of sadness, halfway through the tunnel of disappointment, halfway through the tunnel of frustration or anger, and they check themselves and they don't allow themselves to feel those full emotions. And because of it, that stressor, that emotion is walking around inside of you day after day, clogging you up to experience all these things, and hence the black and white, and hence the quicksand feeling. I think that is probably the best description I've heard. For those of you that have experienced grief or loss, it's not like the loss or the grief goes away, but it changes over time. I think I was brought up, many of us were brought up, emotions are scary things. Let's put them back in the closet, please. And I am learning as I get older that emotions are really part of our human DNA, and they are almost like indicators. They're like little flags, like, ooh, interesting. I feel emotion. I should wonder what that's about rather than shove that in the closet, right? And another sort of language for you is remembering to label the emotions. And sometimes, I'm not going to lie, it's hard to figure out exactly how I feel. I actually have to pause and sit and think about it. And when I get the right label, I just kind of know in my gut. It's just a very simple thing. So far we've kind of identified what burnout might look like. And by the way, if you're listening to this podcast and you're thinking about someone in your world, this might really relate. Second of all, we've talked about this tunnel of emotions, and how this really is a journey, right? We talked about pregnancy. It's 9 months in and 9 months out. The other thing is burnout is cumulative. So for those of you that have been caring for end of life for someone, or have had difficult divorces, or all those sort of family experience things, it's not like you sign the papers and boom, you're divorced. And I've had so many incredible conversations with women about when they sign those papers, different kinds of feelings that they feel: joy, sadness, many things. There's no right or wrong way to feel that, but allowing yourself to feel it so that you can process it and, wait for it, move on, which is, of course, all of our goals. We want to always try and show up as mentally healthy, mentally fit. And that really sets up like the next part of this conversation. So because this burnout is cumulative and it layers upon layers upon layers, I think it behooves us to ask ourselves, when we're not feeling well, where did this start? When did this come from? And so I think we often assume it's work related. I know I have in the past. And we think that by changing our behavior with work, or changing our priorities or our workloads, that burnout's going to solve itself. And that's not effective. I'm just going to say it. It really is about changing our relationship with the work, changing our mindset with the work, changing how we relate to the work, and finally, building in some mental fitness. The world is going at a ridiculous pace. I don't think we are going to be able to keep up with the pandemic pace that we have set for ourselves. And so we're going to have a hard conversation at a lot of our organizations and a lot of our leadership tables about what the new pace of change looks like. Because if we don't, we're going to be losing people off of our staff benches faster than we can replace them. And that's going to really affect our productivity. It's sort of along the same lines as the 4-day work week experience, which I've been following very carefully and very curiously, because I don't think it's so much about having an extra day off as it is about being more productive in the 4 days that we have on. Isn't that interesting? To be continued. So a couple of things as I close out here. If you were to think of your brain as a muscle, how would you use it differently? I think we often expect a lot from our brains. We overtax it. We think we can be in back-to-back meetings from 9 to 5 and everything will be just fine, right? We're going to be able to retain that information. No, we're not going to be able to retain that information. We need to take care of our brains. We need to massage and sort of balance and pace our brains so that we're able to achieve the things we want to do. And if we were to pace our brain, then we're going to have to set some boundaries and set some expectations for those brain neurons of yours. And this is where it gets interesting. So thinking of your brain as a mental fitness exercise, we we exercise to be fit, right? So that we can manage the physical requirements of the day. Think about how that relates to your brain. We exercise our mental fitness so that we have the capacity to show up whole every day for our work. And what burnout does is it steals bit by bit a little bit more of your wholeness until you're showing up as a quarter, as a shadow of yourself, and trying or desperately and expecting that whole self to be there and the whole self's productivity there. Right here, right now, I need to add in the words compassion. Please be kind to yourself right here. The stress comes from the expectation set and what actually happens. In other words, we can actually manage a lot of our stress by managing our expectations. But it's really hard when you're a high-performing executive to lower your standards. None of us want to do that because that is so ingrained in our core beliefs. And I'm not going to be on a podcast for Underdog Leadership and tell you to drop your standards. What I am going to ask you to do is change your relationship with the standards that you have set for yourself. You can have the same high standards, but you also must incorporate, what are the resources I have? How much timeline do I have? How do I want to show up so I can be successful? And most importantly, if this is truly important to me, what do I have to move off the table? You have to want your dreams more than your drama. And a PSA announcement here as well. If you are struggling, if you are having trouble right here, right now, this season, before season, after season, take care of it. It's probably the most important thing that you do on your to-do list. It's by far more important than your plans and your staff, because if you're not there, you can't take care of anyone. Therapy. I'm a big believer in therapy. Where can you get the tools to manage things differently? Notice I said differently, not better or worse. I think we think that we go to therapy because we're broken, or we go to executive coaching because we suck at something. No, I think that the act of reaching out for help, I have learned through my own personal experience, is one that is a really beautiful act of self-love. Therapy is an option. Talking to your doctor and medication is an option. I know myself, exercise really matters to me. Those endorphins really matter to me. And sometimes it's mostly just a little thing to myself. I can't say that enough, that if you are struggling and if you are listening to this Underdog Leadership podcast, who can you turn to right now to talk to? Somebody you can confide in, someone you can talk to. Maybe it's just your journal for right now, but even that small amount of awareness will shift you into what the next steps might be for you. I find it kind of ironic, right? That in this burnout episode, we're talking about tools that we have, but we don't actually talk about our work in terms of energy expenses. Let me give you an example. Going to yoga gives you points, gives you energy. Sitting down to write a strategic plan sucks my energy. The other thing that really sucks my energy is any kind of detail work when I have to compare things. And yet I think I can do an hour and a half of strategic planning and then hop right into the next meeting without any kind of downtime. Is that realistic? I love that idea of energy transfers, right? So there's certain parts of my job that give me energy, like actually doing this podcast really revs me up and brings me great energy. And then acknowledging that other tasks are going to wear me down and make me tired. And that is completely fine as long as I'm monitoring my own energy. I think as leaders, we have to have the responsibility to monitor and self-monitor our energy. And there's a residue that comes out of those meetings when you're revved up on caffeine or whatever. You leave these residues that other people pick up on. And I think we have to be more responsible. I work with senior level executives to help them manage their energy, manage their teams, achieve their goals, but most importantly, be happier doing it. I don't think there's any point in any of those other goals without the be happier doing it. I'm not saying I have everything figured out, but I can tell you that I've committed over 15 years of my life to this study and this pursuit and this exercise of learning about myself and learning how to best coach and support others. If this podcast has resonated for you, if this podcast about burnout and identifying the triggers has resonated, I really invite you to reach out, seek help. Talk to me. Always happy to have a conversation. And you know, that burnout is probably one of the main barriers between you and your ambition. And the world needs your ideas. The world needs your ambition. I think that's a fantastic A word. I love the word ambition. And I'd hate for you to hide behind those burnout stories and not rise to your full potential for yourself, as well as for your company or organization or whoever it is you're supporting with your time, talent, and your treasure. Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end. I hope I've brought some insights into burnout, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Have a great day.